Great to be with you for the McGee Lecture at Marquette University. I wish I could be there in person. Hello to Janine Geske and Sarah Larson, colleagues and friends in this important work of restorative justice and healing. My name is Father Daniel Griffith, and I'm a priest of the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, and have long family ties to Marquette University. Both of my grandfathers graduated from Marquette and actually taught there as well, and my own father as well graduated from Marquette and has always spoken so highly of the Jesuit education. So what I'm going to do today is really dig in the short span that I have, 15 minutes, into restorative justice and the way it connects with our Catholic faith in a powerful way. But first, want to just say, practitioners of restorative justice consistently discover something profoundly good, something deeply human in restorative practices, including in healing circles. We are social creatures, and relationships are central to our identity, our meaning, and our lives. When they are damaged or harmed, they require rebuilding, care, and restoration. The reason why restorative justice has become a worldwide movement across multiple disciplines and professions, and any practitioner will tell you this, is because of its effectiveness. It works time and time again at rebuilding relationships and repairing harm. And it is not only effective, it is adaptable. The foundation, of course, many of us know, is in the indigenous practices of First Nation peoples of North America, New Zealand, and in Australia as well. It's consistent with our nature, our human nature, which is so certainly bound up in terms of relationships and social, but also our yearning for healing and wholeness that we all have. I have happily discovered these past number of years in restorative justice how closely aligned restorative justice is with the nature, the essence, and the goals of biblical justice and Catholic social teaching. It works very well within the Catholic tradition, as we have discovered, Janine and Sarah and others who have been in this work within the Catholic Church. It makes use of the same dynamics, the same orientation. So here's a quick snapshot of the corollaries between Catholic teaching, biblical justice, and restorative justice. The best definition of biblical justice is comprehensive right relationship. I was just having a conversation with a parishioner here at the parish who is a native German speaker. And he says justice translates much easier into German than it does English. But scholars have done the work, including Dan Philpott, who's a colleague and friend of myself and Janine and Sarah, that really what biblical justice means is comprehensive right relationship. Right relationship with God, right relationship with neighbor, right relationship with the environment. My understanding is the McGee Lecture focuses on social justice. Well, this is what biblical justice provides as a foundation for the teachings of the Church, to really orient ourselves to be an instrument of right relationship in society. We see that there are three types of justice in Hebrew Scripture and in the New Testament. Retributive justice, we see that in multiple stories in Genesis. Distributive justice, which is concerned with the just distribution of the goods of the land, particularly concerned with the poor, the widow, the alien, the orphan, which are paradigmatic for those on the margins of the society of Israel. And also restorative justice. This is God's act of liberating his people in Egypt, setting them free and leading ultimately to their full restoration in the promised land. We see it, of course, in the person of Jesus Christ. His mission is all about restoration. It's to reconcile, redeem, and restore us to the love of the Father and to how we were intended to be from the beginning, to be in that wonderful relationship with God. What I've discovered, and I thought, how did I miss this for 15 years of my priesthood, how central restoration is as a biblical and theological theme. The word restore or restorative justice, restore or restoration can be seen more than 200 times in Scripture and is an omnipresent, a ubiquitous theme across multiple biblical genres. And it's also central as a theme of the teachings of the early church fathers. I discovered that last Easter season as I was praying the Liturgy of the Hours and saw how many of the church fathers were employing that theme of restoration, which is central to the mission of Christ and the work of God in the world. Interestingly, too, the last 3 Sundays, this is the message of the gospel. 2 Sundays ago, it was that God is a patient God, to allow us just one more year to produce fruit. When the person is ready, the owner to cut it down, the patient gardener says, no, give it more time. It can bear fruit. Now, we know that oftentimes restorative justice is doing the work and is centrally focused on direct victims of harm. Of course, the harm that was perpetrated upon them, they had no cause of. They are victims. And yet others sometimes find themselves with self-inflicted wounds. Whatever the situation, God is seeking to restore us and to bring us to wholeness and health. 2 Sundays ago was the prodigal son. And you saw the mercy and love of the Father welcoming the Son back. And this Sunday as well, the woman caught in adultery, Jesus does not condemn. Rather, he forgives and sets free, and he restores. Restorative justice is aimed at reestablishing right relationship. This is why it works so well within the Catholic tradition and according to biblical justice. When there has been damage, we do the work often in a circle and in dialogue of repairing the harm, of asking the victim survivor or of those who have been peripherally harmed, what are you seeking? What is your story? Talk about how the harm has affected you, and we can try to figure out a way that we can begin to restore and repair and heal. We see it again on the road to Emmaus, which we'll hear in the Easter season as we're breaking open Luke's gospel. Jesus does a little bit of restorative justice when he asked the 2 disciples, what things? Tell me your story. It almost seems playful, but he's wanting them to share what's within their hearts. And then he interprets Scripture and himself in the light of the Hebrew Scripture, and they experience restoration. Folks in this area who are Christian have talked to that Scripture passage as akin to restorative justice. One of the things that I've seen a number of years ago, 3-4 years ago, is how central the word and theme of restoration is at Christmas and at Easter. You can hear it in the readings, you hear it in the prayers of the liturgy, and again, for 15 years of a 20-year priesthood, I didn't pick this up. And it's really getting into the work of restorative justice, which has been such a great gift, I know, for Janine, Sarah, and those who are practitioners in this area. We often say, I certainly have said, it's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all, but it is an extraordinary instrument for healing and justice, particularly, I think, when paired with Catholic teaching. So let's get to Catholic social teaching and restorative justice. Catholic social teaching seeks to promote a more just and humane social order through objective principles, through its social theory that can be applied in subjective situations or contingent situations. So you think of, perhaps just war teaching, or you think of the analysis which we do in law school setting of policy and law, looking at it through the prism of Catholic social teaching. Is this particular law consistent with human dignity? Does it promote the common good? Is it consistent with our rights or our duties? And so this is a way that we can understand Catholic social teaching. It seeks to attain justice, but also seeks in a particular way to promote both individual and collective flourishing. The great St. Thomas Aquinas realized that in the common good, the human person is not subsumed by the collective, but rather you keep in tension the collective good and the individual good. And you seek both individual and collective flourishing. This is what restorative justice seeks to do. It not only is consistent with the flourishing of individuals who have been harmed, but it also helps rebuild society, one relationship at a time, in a powerful way. We know that sin, injustice, and harm ruptures relationships and inhibits individual and collective flourishing. And so restorative justice, working with Catholic teaching, can really go a long way of promoting that flourishing. Catholic social teaching is also prophetic in its work. It has a prophetic dimension which finds its basis in the prophets of the Hebrew Scripture. They were called to name harm. They were called to name injustice on behalf of those who have been harmed, with the goal of restoring right relationship. That's what restorative justice does. It does the same thing. It names harm. Now, it's not naming harm to shame, neither is Catholic social teaching. It's naming harm to deal with it, to repair it, to restore, to do the work of justice in a powerful way. And so rather than bury our head, sometimes what people want to do when harm occurs, we have to move to it, put light on it, name it, stop it, and heal it. And that's the work both of Catholic social teaching and restorative justice as well. The fundamental principles of Catholic social teaching are the dignity of the human person, the common good, solidarity, subsidiarity, preferential option for the poor and vulnerable, and there are others. This is not an exhaustive list. All of those principles are consistent with the work of restorative justice. And so when you look at this, and I've talked about this in multiple settings, one of the main problems with how the Catholic Church treated victim survivors is they were left on the side of the road, wounded, often blamed, not healed, a lack of accountability for perpetrators. And so in this way, we contravened the message of the Good Samaritan. So Jesus says, not only do I do this work of healing, I have now constituted a church, a community of disciples to continue that work. And so we did the opposite. Our good friend, mutual friend of Janine and mine, who is no longer with us, says this amounted to an inversion of the moral order in terms of how we treated victim survivors in the church. If we had listened to our own teaching, if we had listened to Jesus, if we had followed the Catholic social teaching principles, almost all of these principles were not followed consistently, were contravened, and great harm came about because of it. On the positive side, we can follow the teachings of Jesus. We can incorporate and act consistently with the principles of Catholic social teaching in rebuilding relationships, in having the church make sure that she journeys in a way that is consistent with how Christ wants her to journey, particularly in response to those that she has harmed and wounded. It can be a way back, both the stories and teachings of Jesus, the biblical ethic of the Hebrew Scripture, and the Catholic social teaching as well. I'm coming up on my time, so I'll wrap up here as well. Another thing that I've said in some settings is if the church is called to be a prophetic voice for justice, if the church is to credibly decry justice in some circumstances, then she must make sure that she is doing everything she can to live justice within her own communion, or she will sound like a noisy gong and just err rather than speaking from a place of integrity. So finally, Pope Francis. What a great example our Jesuit Pope has given to the world. He has called the church to be a field hospital. He's shown by example, being an instrument of mercy and justice. He's called the church to a culture of encounter and a culture of accompaniment. I cannot think of anything that is more consistent with that than the work of restorative justice and Catholic teaching together, to accompany someone who has been harmed. This is the gospel in its essence. This is the gospel distilled in its most basic dimension. And so this is the work that we can do together. It's the work that Janine has been doing for years. She has said she feels the presence of the Spirit in this work. I've felt that as well. I'm sure Sarah Larson and other practitioners have as well. And interestingly, they will be with us this fall, both Sarah and Janine, for a 20-person national consultation at St. Thomas University, where we seek to discern whether truth and reconciliation processes can be used in the country, in the Catholic Church in the United States. There's a lot of harm that still needs to be healed, and there is further accountability that needs to happen as well. So it's been great to be with you. There's so many ways that this dynamic relationship of Catholic teaching, biblical justice, and restorative justice can be used together to help heal a wounded church, to help heal a wounded country, to help those who are on the side of the road through no fault of their own, victim survivors, and also to help heal our communities, including in Milwaukee and in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Thank you.